It's playoff time. Week 14 is finally here. Hopefully your teams are in the playoffs, or you got a first round bye and you're ready to go, but plenty to talk about as always with the waiver wire, so we'll get right into it. Let's start at running back. Daniel Herron for Indy. He's clearly taken over the Bradshaw role out there. He's about 50-50 split on the carries, and they like him more in the passing game. So any type of PPR league, you're picking this guy up. But I think all leagues he needs to be owned just because he's touching the ball enough on a great offense. He had a big touchdown run week 13. He's a guy that could definitely have value for the rest of the way. Doug Martin, you got to talk about him. He's only owned about 45% of leagues. My health and mighty have fallen. He's not even close to the runner that he was his rookie year, but he found the end zone. He's a starting running back in the NFL. That's really all that matters. He's not going to be anybody that you're super excited about putting in your lineup, but he's going to touch the ball enough to get you some points and have a little bit of upside. So he should be owned in all leagues. LeGarrette Blount, I want to talk about him. I think he's only a must-add in deeper leagues. You could argue he should be owned in all leagues, but just because of the inconsistencies with not really knowing for sure what's going to happen with the Patriots running game, as of now, Blount looks like the guy that's going to get the early down work, but who knows if that's going to be how it sticks from here on out. But it's a good chance he's going to get the goal lines. He's going to have a decent upside from week to week. Andre Williams, I do want to talk about him. Only on 45% of leagues. He did not look that great in relief for Rashad Jennings, but he might get another chance. Jennings is saying that he thinks he's going to be ready for week 14, but players are always way more optimistic than they should be. Look at what Arian Foster said when he hurt himself. He ended up missing 2 games. Rashad Jennings couldn't even put weight on his ankle after the game week 13. I'm not buying that he'll be ready for week 14. I think if you have Rashad Jennings, you should be making other arrangements, and if Williams is available, you're going to want to pick him up. Looking at receiver, Kenny Stills, big game, monster game for him. With Cooks out of the way, Stills kind of takes over that kind of boomer bust receiver for the Saints. So he's going to be in that role for the rest of the way. He's going to have big upsides week to week, but he's going to have a high ceiling and a low floor. So just keep that in mind. But I think he should be owned in all leagues. Dante Moncrief for Indy. Another great young receiver that's breaking out this year. He's only owned about 5% of leagues. He's quickly kind of taken over maybe even the wide receiver 2 spot out there, and just in terms of targets, I think Wayne's starting to get less and less targets. Moncrief's starting to get a few more, so he could have more value than Wayne from here on out. Obviously, T.Y. is the number 1 out there, but Moncrief has looked great. He's looked impressive. Stedman Bailey's another guy I want to talk about out there with the Rams. They don't really have that much going on as far as the receivers go. Quick was having a breakout year before his injury, but Bailey now seems to be the Rams receiver to own. If you're going to start a Rams receiver on your fantasy team, I'd say he's really the only one that I would get excited about starting. At tight end, we got to talk about Jordan Reed. He stayed healthy for an entire game. That was kind of impressive. And he had a big game. We know this kid's talented. We know he's good. He just can't stay out on the field. But if he is able to stay healthy for the rest of the season, he could be tight end 1 for you. So if you've been struggling with your tight end, if you got Julius Thomas, you're not really sure if he's going to come back yet, you're going to want to pick up Reed for security. And I think he does have definitely tight end 1 upside from here on out. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Johnny Football. Got to talk about my boy Johnny. I'm definitely disappointed that it's taken this long for him to get a chance to maybe take over the role, but I think they will announce him the starter for week 14, and you got to be excited about his fantasy potential. As far as the running quarterbacks go, they're not running as much as they were a couple years ago when those guys broke out. There's not really a true running quarterback right now in the NFL. I think Manziel could be that guy. And when your quarterback rushes for 60 to 80 yards, they don't need to pass very much to have a productive fantasy week. So Manziel, give me 60 rushing yards and 250 passing yards, a couple touchdowns mixed in there. That's a solid fantasy week for you. I think that's very realistic for Johnny Manziel. So any type of 2 quarterback league, really deep single quarterback leagues, you want to take a look at Manziel. He could help you down the stretch. Now let's talk about defenses. I wanted to highlight the defenses a little bit this week because at this point in the season, it's not about trade bait. It's not necessarily about filling your bench with upside. It's about filling your bench with players that might find your starting lineup. If you're not in any type of keeper league, if you're in a redraft league, it's all about your starting lineup. In one of my leagues, I'm carrying 4 defenses right now because I have my defense for this week, I got my defense for next week, week 15 and week 16, because those are going to be in my starting lineup. And yeah, I'll drop them as they go along and as they play each week, but it's so important to pay attention to your defensive matchups and make sure you plan ahead for your defenses. Next week, week 14, I love Minnesota. Only own about 30% of leagues. Monster game for them. Couple of punts blocked for touchdowns. They got the Jets week 14. If you can get Minnesota on your team, I love them as a pickup and play. The Rams are another big one that I like. They're only in about 70% of leagues. They're in a few more leagues, but there's still enough leagues out there that they're available in, and they got the Redskins week 14. You got to be excited about that. The Rams had a huge game week 13. And then, like I said, you got to start planning ahead. Baltimore, they're on about 50% of leagues right now. They have the Jags week 15. If you have a bye, or if you have room on your team for a couple of defenses, I'll go ahead and pick up Baltimore so you got your defense for week 15, because that can be the difference. And also too, you just got to really look at your bench. If you've been stashing a Devontae Freeman or your Eric Decker's your wide receiver 5, so many things have to happen for them to find your starting lineup, but your defense is going to be in there every week. And if you can pick up a defense now and have a better one for when it counts the most, highly recommended. If you got any questions, post them in the forums, and we'll see you later in the week.